It's a fact, when you reach a certain level of success, you can count on your competitors to be at your doorstep. You see it everywhere, in every industry, and it wasn't different in the 90s, when Sega introduced the Sega Game Gear.
It swept the country like a plague. Colorless video games. But there is hope. Color?
The Game Gear was Sega's response to Nintendo's Game Boy. Sega came out swinging, taking on the Game Boy, the Lynx, and the NEC Turbo Express. It promised to have everything that was missing with its competitors.
Welcome to the next level.
But only on paper. The Game Gear made its appearance when the Game Boy was reigning supreme, pumping out games like there was no tomorrow, so the Gear had to come in the ring well prepared. The Game Gear came out in the 1990s, the same year as the Turbo Express was released.
Power up with the ultimate in handheld portable.
The Turbo Express was hard to find in my area, so I never saw one physically. All I knew about it that it was more expensive and it was more capable than the Game Gear. Even looking at it today, it had a better design. On the same market, you had the Atari Lynx, but the problem with the Lynx was that even though the Atari console made it big with the retro games like Galaga, Joyce, Spy Hunter, just to name a few, it was the Sega Master System and the Nintendo NES that felt like the new generation of gaming. And this is where the Sega Game Gear comes into place. The one advantage it has was having almost the same specs as the Sega Master System.
Choose your choice and listen. It's time to prove yourself. Game Gear from Sega.
The Game Gear was wider and beefier than the other units on the market. It was comfortable in the hands because of its grip. Unless you had a big bag with you, portability was okay. Like the Lynx and the Turbo, it offers a 3.2 color LCD screen, and it was capable to play multiplayer with the help of a cable. It took 6 batteries to run the unit, so battery life wasn't great, so bringing the unit on a long trip wasn't worth it, unless you had the option to plug it in. One thing I did find very interesting is that you could turn it into a portable TV, and of course, today you have smartphones that can do everything. But back then, portable TV looked like this. Having the option to turn it into a portable TV set was amazing. Just like the Turbo Express, but it came with a cost. I never had a chance to get myself one, as I was young at the time, but it was one of those features that I was sold on. The Game Boy and the Game Gear were similar, but different at the same time. They both were leading on the console war, and they both had a cultural impact. They were succeeding where the other consoles were failing. The real battle was in the game production. In the long run, the Game Gear had over 300 games in its library. Classical games like the Sonic the Hedgehog, Shinobi, Alex Kidd, Wonder Boy, and Street of Rage, only to name a few. Even with all that, this is where Sega was struggling to compete with the Game Boy, because the Game Boy was pumping a lot of games constantly. Gaming magazines will always show a lot of Game Boy games coming up, but very few for the Game Gear, and this led to another problem. Young people were choosing the Game Boy unit over the Game Gear, mainly because their friend had one, and the other factor had to do with the price point. Nintendo's Game Boy dominated the price war, beating everybody out. Sega did attempt to lower the price over time, but Nintendo either matched it or even went lower. There was no escaping it. And to make matters worse, as a kid, you would get the Gear as a present only to ask for batteries. 6 double A's, and you usually wind up getting the cheap ones, so your playtime would last only 3 hours. Yeah, battery life was bad, and to get the most out of it, you had to plug it in, but that defeated the purpose of being portable anywhere.
Makes it a color TV.
The unit was a bit bulky. As a kid, holding the Gear wasn't a problem because of its size, but I can't imagine someone with small hands playing for a long time. Although the color screen made the Game Gear appealing, it had a known issue for ghosting. If you played a fast game with a lot going on, you will notice it. And these were the issues you had to consider when you were buying a Game Gear at the time. Nintendo tried very hard to cover a lot of corner to push you to buy a new Game Boy. With a plethora of classic characters, and still going on strong today, with the games to back it up, the Game Gear had an uphill battle getting to the end. I remember watching Sega's ad TV, and I'm not sure that mocking the competition was a good idea.
Attention consumers, certain portable gaming systems are being dressed up in order to distract the buyer from their ordinary one-color play. What could be next? Little flower print dresses?
It felt unnecessary. They should have promoted the advantage of owning the unit, rather than turning to mockery. The Sega Game Gear was a good handheld despite everything. I still remember when I got mine, it felt like the whole new level. And when the night came, it magically lit up my room. I would have loved to watch it grow some more and see how far Sega would have gone, but the gods of the gaming had other plans for it. And as you can see, I still got mine, and I got into gear.